On a cold, wind-swept evening, under the haunting glow of a crescent moon, a streak of light tore through the sky of a small, remote town. The few sleepy residents who noticed assumed it was a shooting star and made fleeting wishes upon it. None could have guessed that this was no meteorite, but a spacecraft, a royal escape pod from the distant planet of Zarmina. Within the crumpled remains of this alien craft lay Princess Serafina, the sole heir to the throne of Zarmina. Her once regal attire was now scorched and tattered, evidence of her harrowing escape from a coup that had shattered her world. Bleeding and semi-conscious, she clung to life, her breath shallow, her thoughts drifting between fear and despair. Her pod had crash-landed on the outskirts of a dense forest, miles away from civilization. The impact had created a small crater, with the pod's once sleek metallic surfaces now twisted and exposed to Earth's chill night air. The princess, with her ethereal appearance, silvery skin that shimmered under the moonlight, and eyes like faceted sapphires, was a stark contrast to the rough, dark terrain of her unintended refuge. Hours passed, and as dawn broke, a figure approached. Jack Mason, a local farmer and a widower, was out for his morning walk, a ritual to soothe his troubled mind. His path, altered slightly by a whim, a desire to explore a different part of the forest that morning, brought him to the smoldering remains of the pod. Jack, a man of sturdy build and practical mind, was no stranger to the surprises of rural life, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight before him. Curiosity mingled with caution as he approached. The wreckage was unlike anything he had seen, certainly not the usual debris from a plane or satellite. And then he saw her, a figure so out of place in his familiar world, lying amidst the twisted metal. Her breathing was labored, and her form seemed fragile, almost translucent under the first light of day. Instinctively, Jack rushed to her side. He knew she needed help, and although her appearance was startling, his inherent kindness overrode his hesitation. He gently lifted her, noticing the lightness of her body despite her tall stature, and carried her back to his farmhouse. As he walked, with the alien princess in his arms, Jack couldn't help but feel that his life was about to change. The world seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of morning, birds chirping, leaves rustling, muted, as if in reverence to the gravity of his discovery. Back at the farmhouse, Jack laid Serafina on the couch. Her wounds were beyond what his first aid knowledge could handle, yet he did his best, cleaning her cuts and applying bandages. All the while, Serafina floated in and out of consciousness, her lips murmuring words he could not understand. As she lay there, her mind raced with fragmented images of her home planet, her family, and the chaos that had driven her to flee. Zarmina, once a planet of peace and technological marvel, had been torn apart by betrayal. Her father, the king, had been killed, her mother taken prisoner, and Serafina had barely escaped with her life. Earth was never her intended destination. Her pod had malfunctioned, diverting from its original course. But here she was, on a planet so unlike her own, depending on the kindness of a stranger. As her eyes fluttered open, meeting Jack's concerned gaze, a silent acknowledgement passed between them, a recognition of her desperate situation and his willingness to help. In that moment, a bond was formed, one that would challenge the boundaries of their worlds, their beliefs, and their hearts. But first, Jack needed to understand where she came from and what dangers might follow her to his doorstep. For now, though, he simply watched over her, waiting for her to regain enough strength to speak, to explain her presence in his world. As the first chapter of their unexpected journey closed, the sun rose higher, casting light on the path that lay ahead, a path fraught with challenges and revelations that neither could have anticipated. As Serafina's eyes fluttered open, the foreign environment of Jack's farmhouse felt like another layer of her nightmare. The rustic interior, adorned with relics of terrestrial life, fishing rods, family photographs, and hand-knitted blankets, stood in stark contrast to the sleek, minimalistic design of her royal chamber back on Zarmina. She sat up gingerly, pain shooting through her body, a grim reminder of her brutal escape. Jack watched from the kitchen doorway, a mug of steaming coffee in his hands, his brow furrowed with concern. "You're awake," he said simply, his voice betraying a mix of relief and apprehension. "How are you feeling?" Serafina's sapphire eyes studied him, her mind racing to piece together the language she had been briefed on during her interstellar travels. "I am in pain, but alive," she managed to say, her voice a melodic whisper that filled the quiet room. Jack approached, placing the coffee on a coaster. "I've done what I can for your wounds, but I'm no doctor. There's a town about 20 miles from here. We could find more help there." "Thank you, but no," Serafina replied quickly, the thought of exposing herself to more humans filling her with dread. "Your aid is sufficient. I must contact my ship, if it still exists." Jack's eyes widened at the mention of another ship. The implications were too large to grasp fully. "Your ship? You mean there are others like you?" She nodded, her gaze dropping. "My escape pod was separated during an incident. I need to know if the others survived." Understanding the urgency, Jack offered his phone, but Serafina shook her head. "I require something more powerful. Earth's technology is different from what I am accustomed to." Determined to help, Jack led her to his old barn, which housed not only his farming tools but also an array of old radio equipment he tinkered with as a hobby. "Maybe you can use some of this," he suggested, gesturing towards the dusty shelves filled with wires and metal boxes. With a slight smile, Serafina approached the equipment. Her delicate fingers danced over the devices, her touch light but confident. To Jack's astonishment, she began to assemble a makeshift communication device from the parts, her movements precise and fluid. As she worked, Jack observed in silence, his mind grappling with the reality of a universe much larger and more complex than he had ever imagined. Serafina, noticing his stare, paused to explain. "Zarmina is part of a federation of planets. We were peaceful explorers." "Was," Jack echoed, the word hanging heavily between them. "Until the betrayal," Serafina said, her voice hardening. "A faction within our council staged a coup. They killed my father and took my mother. I fled to preserve what remains of our line." The transmitter crackled to life, breaking the somber mood. Serafina adjusted a few knobs, her focus intense. Suddenly, a burst of static was replaced by a clear, albeit foreign series of beeps and tones. She responded in kind, her language musical and strange. After a moment, her shoulders slumped slightly, and she turned to Jack with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "My ship, some survived. They are coming, but it will take time. They are far." Jack nodded, understanding her relief and her predicament. "You can stay here as long as you need to," he offered. "This place is safe and I can help you." Serafina looked at him, her sapphire eyes reflecting a depth of gratitude. "Thank you, Jack. I am in your debt." As they exited the barn, the alien princess and the earthly farmer returned to the house to plan their next moves. Each step they took was a step into the unknown, but together, they began to navigate the complexities of a situation neither could have ever anticipated. Over the following days, the routine at the farmhouse began to change subtly to accommodate its unusual guest. Jack found himself dividing time between his daily chores and assisting Serafina in enhancing her makeshift communication device. The device now resembled a complex mesh of Earth technology intertwined with alien craftsmanship, pulsing with a gentle blue glow that seemed to hum with a life of its own. Serafina, growing stronger and more accustomed to her earthly surroundings, took to exploring Jack's farm, her curiosity about this planet growing with each passing day. Despite the tranquility of the rural landscape, her mind remained vigilant, always alert to the danger that might still be tracing her path across the stars. Meanwhile, Jack noticed odd occurrences that began to unsettle him. Distant sounds of engines at night, unusual patterns of lights in the sky, and a subtle, unexplained interference on his radio equipment. He kept these observations to himself, not wanting to alarm Serafina, but his concern grew with each anomaly. One evening, As the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Serafina stood by the fence, watching the horizon. "Back home," she began softly, not turning to face Jack as he approached. "The skies are filled with ships, some for travel, some for trade, and some for less peaceful purposes." Jack leaned against the fence beside her. "Do you think they followed you here?" he asked, his voice low. "It's possible," she admitted. "The faction that overthrew my father, they wouldn't stop at just taking over Zarmina. They'd want to ensure no rightful heir could ever come back to challenge them." Jack's hand instinctively clenched. "We'll deal with it if it comes to that. You're not alone here." Her grateful smile was fleeting. "I know, and I appreciate it, Jack. But your world shouldn't have to face the troubles of mine." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden crackle from the barn, the communication device. They rushed back, finding the screen alive with alien script, glowing more intensely than ever. Serafina quickly deciphered the message, her face falling. "They're closer than I thought," she murmured. "Not the usurpers, but my people. They're sending a scout ship, but it seems they've been detected entering your solar system." The implications were immediate and serious. If her people had been detected by Earth's rudimentary systems, it meant that her pursuers might also know where to find her. Jack watched her closely. "What do we do now?" "We prepare," Serafina said, her tone resolute. "I cannot risk an encounter here. It could bring harm to you and this place." Together, they began to formulate a plan. Using the barn as their base, they started modifying some of the farm equipment. Jack's old tractor was repurposed with parts from the communication device, creating a vehicle that could handle more than just plowing fields. Serafina, with her advanced knowledge, rigged a basic yet effective cloaking device around the farmhouse, rendering it nearly invisible to most sensors. As night enveloped the world, they tested their contraptions under the cover of darkness. The tractor, now a rugged all-terrain vehicle, moved silently across the field, its new form barely recognizable under the makeshift stealth technology. Their preparations were cut short by a sharp alert from the communication device. A new message appeared, urgent and stark. The scout ship had arrived but was under attack. "Looks like we're out of time," Jack said, glancing up at the starry sky, now a canvas of beauty that hid the perils approaching them. "Whatever's coming, we'll face it together." Serafina nodded, her expression hardened by the resolve to protect not just herself, but the quiet earthly haven that had taken her in. As they stood side by side, the line between their worlds blurred, bound by a shared resolve to stand against the shadows that hunted them from the stars. Under the cloak of night, the first signs of the impending conflict became visible. The once serene skyline was intermittently lit by flashes of distant light, silent but intense bursts that marked the clash between Serafina's scout ship and her pursuers in the upper atmosphere. The Earth's tranquility was being pierced by the echoes of a distant galactic strife, now descending upon this secluded part of the world. Inside the barn, Serafina and Jack monitored the situation through the alien communication device, which translated the skirmishes into data and diagrams that painted a grim picture. "They're struggling to maintain cloaking," Serafina explained as she interpreted the incoming data. "The attackers have technology that's disrupting their systems. If they are forced down, we'll need to be ready to move at a moment's notice," Jack finished, checking over their improvised gear. He had never imagined his quiet farmer's life would turn into a tactical defense operation, but the reality of their situation was undeniable. As they prepared, Serafina gave Jack a crash course in operating the alien tech embedded into their makeshift vehicle. The tractor was now an unlikely escape pod on wheels, equipped with a basic navigation system pulled from the cosmos. "It won't fly, but it will get us away fast," she assured him, her hands deftly adjusting the controls. The tension spiked as a loud, unfamiliar sound pierced the air, a harsh, grating noise that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath them. "They're here," Serafina whispered, a chill running down her spine despite her composed demeanor. Jack rushed to the barn door, peering out cautiously. In the distance, he could see lights descending rapidly, cutting through the night sky towards the forest near their location. There's more than one, Jack noted, counting the lights. We have to assume they're hostile. Serafina nodded, her face set in determination. My people's ship will try to draw them off, but we should not rely on that. We need to leave now. They quickly loaded their supplies into the vehicle, securing everything in silence. Each movement was methodical, driven by the urgency of their flight. As they set off, the farmhouse faded into the background, shrouded by the cloaking device, an eerie sight of their home being swallowed by invisibility to protect it from enemy eyes. Driving through the forest, the path illuminated only by the vehicle's dimmed lights, Jack felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with a profound sense of duty. Beside him, Serafina operated the communication device, coordinating with her scout ship, her voice calm but firm as she relayed instructions in her flowing, musical language. They reached a clearing just as the first rays of dawn began to light the horizon, revealing the extent of the chaos above. Several small crafts engaged in an aerial battle, their maneuvers swift and fierce. One of the enemy ships broke away from the conflict, its path curving sharply towards the ground, a few miles from their location. We can't outrun them, not in this, Jack stated, eyeing the descending craft. Serafina paused, considering their options. Then we don't run. We hide. She pointed to a densely wooded area. There. We can shield the vehicle and wait them out. Jack steered the tractor into the woods, navigating through tight spaces until they were deep within the cover of towering trees. Serafina activated the vehicle's cloaking technology, and like a mirage, they vanished from sight, tucked away in the natural fortress of the forest. As they waited, hidden from their pursuers, but fully aware of the dangers looming just beyond their shelter, the bond between them solidified. Each was a protector, a survivor in their own right, their fates intertwined by cosmic forces far beyond the ordinary scope of human experience. The battle raged on in the skies, but for now, they were safe, cloaked in the quiet sanctuary of Earth's ancient woodland, holding their breath as the new day dawned, bringing with it unknown challenges and fleeting hopes for survival. As the early morning sun filtered through the dense canopy, the light played tricks with the shadows, creating a mosaic of movement that kept Jack and Serafina on edge. They remained silent, their eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement, their senses tuned to the slightest sound that could betray an approaching danger. From their hidden vantage point, they could see glimpses of the aerial battle. It was less intense now, the bursts of light sporadic but still ominously close. Serafina's fingers moved deftly over the device, maintaining constant communication with her scout ship, which was now maneuvering to draw the enemy away from their position. They're holding them off, but it's just a matter of time before they have to retreat to conserve energy, Serafina murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. We may need to move again soon. Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. We'll head towards the mountains, he suggested. It's rough terrain, and it'll give us the advantage of higher ground. Serafina agreed, but her expression was pensive, her mind clearly working through a myriad of strategies and contingencies. The mountains could provide a more permanent hiding spot, she conceded. But moving there isn't without risk. We'll be exposed until we reach the cover of the higher forests. Their discussion was suddenly interrupted by a soft crackling sound, branches breaking underfoot. Jack's hand went instinctively to the makeshift weapon he'd fashioned from farming tools. They both froze, listening, as the sounds grew closer, more deliberate. Then, as quickly as it had started, the noise ceased, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to press in on them. Serafina's device buzzed softly, a signal from her ship. She read the message and breathed a slight sigh of relief. It's not them, she informed Jack. It's an earthly animal, curious about our vehicle. Despite the tension, her lips twitched into a half-smile. It seems we're not the only ones interested in strange visitors. The moment of levity helped to ease the strain, and they allowed themselves a few minutes to relax their vigilance. Jack took the opportunity to learn more about the planet Serafina called home. What's Zarmina like? He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Her eyes lit up with the question. It's vibrant, alive. The cities are built around natural formations, and the architecture is designed to harmonize with the environment. We have oceans that glow with bioluminescent life, mountains that reach into the clouds, and skies filled with ships of all kinds. Her voice was wistful, her gaze distant. I miss it. The personal insight drew them closer, humanizing the epic scale of the cosmic drama they were embroiled in. But the respite was brief. Another alert from the device snapped their focus back to the present. The scout ship was retreating, the enemy too strong and numerous to fend off any longer. We need to move, Serafina said, urgency creeping back into her voice. They dismantled their temporary camp with practiced efficiency, leaving no trace of their presence as they prepared to navigate deeper into the unknown. Jack steered the vehicle out of its hiding spot, and they began the precarious journey towards the mountains. As they moved, the landscape changed, the dense forest giving way to rocky terrain and steep inclines. The challenge of the environment tested their resolve and their makeshift technology, but both were determined to survive, to outlast the pursuers who sought to end Serafina's claim to her home, and perhaps even her life. As they ascended into the rugged heart of the mountain range, the air grew cooler, and the sky seemed to stretch on forever, a vast canvas that reminded them both of how small their troubles were in the grand scheme of the universe. Yet, those troubles were far from over, and as they set up a new, more secure camp hidden among the rocks and trees, they prepared for the next phase of their relentless struggle. As the rugged terrain of the mountains enveloped them, Jack and Serafina found themselves adapting to a life of constant vigilance and mobility. The higher altitudes offered not only strategic advantage, but also a profound isolation that sharpened their senses and steeled their resolve. Their new camp, nestled between towering pines and jagged rocks, was barely visible, even to the keenest eyes. Here, they built a more permanent base, using the natural cave formations and dense foliage to their advantage. Serafina, with her advanced knowledge, set up sensors that could detect any electronic disturbances, creating a perimeter of security, while Jack fortified the physical barriers. The tranquility of their mountain refuge was deceptive, as both knew the enemy was still searching, their sensors sweeping the planet for any trace of the fugitive princess. Serafina's nights were filled with hushed communications with her scout ship, now hiding in the outer atmosphere, cloaked and waiting for a chance to strike back or escape. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky landscape, Serafina received a transmission that changed everything. "They're planning a final assault," she whispered to Jack, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the device. "They've located the scout ship. They believe it will lead them to me." Jack's response was calm and decisive. "Then we make our last stand here. We have the high ground, and with your technology, we can make this place a fortress." They spent the night preparing, setting up energy traps and optimizing the cloaking devices. Serafina programmed the sensors to create false signals, leading away from their location, a maze of misleading information to confuse and delay their pursuers. As dawn broke, the silence was shattered by the distant hum of engines. The enemy had arrived, their craft sweeping the lower valleys, searching for the elusive signal that would lead them to Serafina. But the traps held, each false lead taking the enemy further from the truth, buying them time, wearing down the invaders' resolve. Jack watched through binoculars as one craft after another turned away, frustrated by the wild goose chase they'd been sent on. Beside him, Serafina monitored the energy levels, ensuring that their defenses remained strong, her face set in a mask of concentration. The turning point came mid-morning when a larger ship, sleek and menacing, entered the valley. It was a command vessel, and its presence meant the enemy was growing desperate. Serafina turned to Jack, her eyes grim. "This is it. They're using everything they have." Together, they activated the last of their defenses, a powerful electromagnetic pulse hidden beneath the surface, designed to disable any technology that ventured too close. The command ship, leading the final sweep, was the first to falter, its systems overwhelmed by the pulse. It crashed into the valley below, a ball of fire and smoke. The victory was immediate and complete. The remaining enemy crafts retreated, their command structure in disarray, their mission a failure. Jack and Serafina watched in silence as the ships disappeared from the sky, the threat vanquished for now. In the aftermath, they sat overlooking the valley, the wreckage of the enemy ship a stark reminder of the battle they'd fought. "You think they'll come back?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps," Serafina replied, her gaze on the horizon. "But not today. Today we've won." Her hand found Jack's, a human gesture of companionship and gratitude. As they prepared to send a signal to her scout ship, signaling the coast was clear for now, Serafina felt a surge of hope. With Jack by her side and the might of her loyal followers above, she knew she had a fighting chance to reclaim her throne and restore peace to her world. The mountains stood silent around them, witnesses to their struggle, their resilience, a testament to the power of unity and the strength found in unexpected alliances. As they turned their eyes to the stars plotting their next move, the earth below seemed a little less foreign, the sky above a little more like home.